They were dubbed as the New British Invasion, the best British invasion band of the 80s by some press outlets, but they were from East Detroit. They played power pop and were often lumped in with new wave. Their debut album consisted of one of the best known songs of all time, but it may surprise you to know it wasn't a commercial hit, despite getting a lot of play on a then fledgling network called MTV. It wasn't until a commercial licensed the song almost a decade later that the floodgates opened for the song to appear in numerous Hollywood productions and video games. It's also been covered by musicians from different eras, introducing the song to a wider audience. It resulted in the band having something more important than a chart hit, longevity. But despite all this, the band never really saw much money from the song. They soon disappeared for a period of time. In an ironic twist, the very song that kept them relevant was enriching people other than the members who wrote it. Today, let's explore the whole story. The origins of the Romantics can be traced back to 1969 when guitarist Mike Skill, who is the son of a bookkeeper, met drummer Jimmy Marinos at Finney High School in Detroit's East Side. They went to concerts together, seeing Jay Giles' band, the Stooges, and the MC5. Skill told the Detroit Free Press, they, referring to the MC5, were my favorite group. I used to go see them at the Colonial Hotel in Mount Clemens. Detroit during the 60s and 70s gave the rock world acts like Alice Cooper, Iggy Pop, and Bob Seger, most of which of course had an impact on shaping the Romantic sound. Skill and Marinos met up with another guitarist named Robert Gillespie, playing in a band called Albatross, and they later used the moniker Rock On, which was inspired by the Humble Pie album. But the band was short-lived, and by 1971 they were finished. Marinos and Skill stuck together, and they found a guy named Wally Palmar who was playing a show at a school in Hamtramck. Palmer was fronting a 1950s-style Eddie Cochran-style outfit that had girl backup singers. The pair loved Palmer's showmanship on stage and knew that they wanted to be in a band with him. Palmer had a particular fondness for Motown, the Beatles, as well as the Stones, the Dave Clark Five, and the Kinks, in addition to early Bob Seger. It was the Yardbirds that taught Palmer how to play harmonica. Palmer also had a friend, bassist Rich Cole, who finalized the classic lineup of the Romantics. This was around Valentine's Day 1977. Their first gig was supporting Rob Tyner's MC5 at My Fair Lady on Jefferson in Detroit. Their third gig was playing in front of 80,000 people at Pontiac Stadium, opening for the likes of Steve Miller Band, Peter Frampton, and Jay Giles Band. They played that gig wearing matching orange suits from a thrift store. Before they got signed, they really didn't wear leather. They had their clothes made out of tablecloth material, according to the band's seamstress. It wasn't until they got a major label deal that they started wearing their matching leather suits they later became known for. Another early gig the band played was on a cruise ship, playing to a captive sea audience of about 2,000 people. As for the name The Romantics, it was meant to present something alternative to what was popular in the Detroit music scene, with Cole telling the Miami Herald. Jimmy came up with the name back in 77 when all the bands were doing punk, with Marinos adding, you know what a romantic is? A romantic is an idealist, an adventurer. It was an answer to the negative attitudes in the air. Apart from those two early gigs I talked about, gigs in Detroit proved to be difficult to get. While there were a few small clubs who'd let them play, the Romantics decided to branch out and play in other markets, mostly in Midwestern cities, and they even headed up north to Canada to play Toronto. Each of these cities had clubs that were full of people looking to find new music. Then they started to play the East Coast cities like New York, Boston, and Philly, as well as Washington, D.C. The band had issued two singles early in their career. The 1978 single on Spider Records, Little White Lies, followed that year by the bomb single Tell It to Carrie. All of these were re-recorded later for their first LP. The band had started to earn glowing reviews, with Cream magazine even bestowing upon them the best of the new models. By 79, the Romantics were back in Detroit, and they were now packing clubs, and record labels came calling. Seymour Stein from Sire showed interest in the band, as did Capitol Records producer John Carter, who was so interested in the band that he gave them money to record some demos. Now, there's been two varied versions of what happened next. One story is that they first met producer Peter Solly of Procol Harum and also Whitesnake fame, an Englishman who self-exiled to America to produce records for record label Nemperor. Solly had not just played in other bands, but he also did jingles for TV for clients like British Airways, BMW, and Coca-Cola, and he also worked with a variety of accomplished artists like Motorhead and Peter Frampton, as well as Ted Nugent. Solly had seen the Romantics on what he described as his fifth trip to New York. He liked the band so much he offered to produce their first LP. He just needed to get Nat Weiss, who was the head of Nemper, to see the band. So Weiss flew out to New York to see them, and even went to Detroit several times to take in more performances before signing the group. Weiss reportedly said at the time, "I passed up on Cheap Trick and blew it with the Cars, and I'm not going to let this one go." The band even started to get offers from other labels around this time, but they opted to sign with Nemper because Weiss seemed to be the most sincere. The other version of events is that the band first met Weiss, and then they met Peter Solly. With a small budget, the band relocated with their producer to Miami Beach's Coconut Studio. Solly spent a lot of time arranging the band's songs, including the track What I Like About You. But the producer never asked for songwriting credits. The sessions were completed in about 3 weeks, with Solly looking back, telling the Detroit Free Press, "We were going for that bright, brassy, trashy, all-American, but based in British sound." This resulted in the band's first LP, their self-titled release in 1980. But Solly didn't initially get a good response from his friends in England when he played them the record. He recalled playing it for YouTube producer Steve Lillywhite, stating he hated it. Solly added that no one really thought What I Like About You was destined to become a big hit. He claimed that everyone thought that the big song was going to be When I Look in Your Eyes. A film crew from the Netherlands soon came to Los Angeles to film the band performing lip-synced versions of When I Look in Your Eyes and What I Like About You at the Whiskey A Go-Go. What I Like About You was written by Palmar, Steele, and Marinos. It may surprise you to know, though, that the song wasn't a huge hit. The drummer, Marinos, was the one who actually sang lead on it. The members told the Washington Times why their drummer sang leads, saying, "All four of us were singers. During our live sets, we would alternate singing leads on songs, and our drummer, Jimmy, sang on a handful too. The way the song came about was that Jimmy needed something to sing that was simple enough with a straight-ahead beat." The band took inspiration from several other songs. The "yeah, hey, refrain was influenced by the Yardbirds' Over, Under, Sideways, Down, and Chuck Berry's Back in the USA. As for the riff, it took inspiration from several songs, Neil Diamond's Cherry Cherry, as well as the Standells' 1966 hit, Sometimes Good Guys Don't Wear White, and Joe Jackson's 1979 single, I'm the Man. Years later, it seemed to inspire John Mellencamp's song ROCK in the USA. In fact, Mellencamp was at a gig that the Romantics were playing, and the members claimed that he may have been inspired by what he saw, because his follow-up record ended up being his breakout hit. The Romantics became known for their iconic image, their matching red leather suits. But what was up with the style? Well, they took inspiration from Motown bands like the Temptations and the Four Tops, who all dressed the same. It also helped the band establish an identity, and as they put it, with an identity, they now could let the music do the talking. The Romantics took these British invasion influences that they had, combined with the Detroit rock scene that they grew up in, and churned out 3-minute power pop tunes. Much of the press made note of the band maintaining their rough Detroit edge, attacking their music with ferocity while still being mindful of hooks and melodies. While What I Like About You was already popular in their live sets, when it was issued as a single, it only peaked at number 49 on the Hot 100 chart. Its biggest success, though, happened in Australia, where it reached number 2 on the charts, and it was the 13th most successful single of that year down under. The Miami Herald made note that if the band had issued their self-titled debut record 8 months prior, it might have been the Romantics on everyone's turntable instead of the Knack. By the time the Romantics got signed, there was a power pop explosion and major labels were scooping up anyone with a skinny tie. The Knack, The Beat, 2020, and The Shoes. The members admitted that their label also didn't have a huge marketing push behind promoting What I Like About You, and thus it wasn't added to as many radio stations as they would have liked. What I like about you, you hold me tight. Their debut record went on to sell somewhere in the order of 250,000 copies. It was the same year the band returned with their follow-up national breakout. In doing press for the album, Marinos admitted to the Detroit Free Press, "On the first album, we were too stiff." But by the end of the decade, the song got a rebirth and a new lease on life when it was licensed for use in a Bud Light commercial.
What I like about you.
Couple this with Michael Morales covering the song in 1989, and funny enough, the cover actually eclipsed the original by peaking at number 29 on the Hot 100 chart. Since then, it's been heavily licensed by Hollywood, appearing in big-name franchises like Shrek, and while it didn't break the top 40, it had something better: longevity. The group 5 Seconds of Summer covered it, exposing the song to a whole new audience. The punk band The Suicide Machines even covered the song as well, and the hair band Poison covered it years later on their cover album Poisoned. It's even become heavily played at sporting events as well. If you're a fan of the TV show The Office, you might even remember the parody of it.
What I hate about you, you really suck as a ball.
What I Like About You also ended up being the name of a sitcom starring Jenny Garth and Amanda Bynes that aired on the WB from 2002 to 2006. For its theme song, the show used a cover of the Romantics tune by the Canadian female rock band Lilix. 2 decades after What I Like About You was released, the song was averaging about 30,000 plays a year on TV and radio, generating hundreds of thousands of dollars in royalties. But the band didn't see a penny of it, and they weren't even aware their song was being licensed for so many movies and TV shows. In music, it's not uncommon for artists to get rich by having one hit. As the Chicago Tribune pointed out, Bonnie Raitt made millions for selling something to talk about to Hollywood. So how much did the Romantics make for What I Like About You, which was played basically everywhere by the tail end of the 80s, and it became a staple at Chicago Bulls home games? As the Chicago Tribune put it, the band earned maybe a few slices of pepperoni pizza. The Romantics signed such a horrendous management deal in the early days with their original managers that years ago, What I Like About You became a jingle for a Michigan pizza joint. Their manager, Joel Martin, told the Chicago Tribune, "For all we know, they could have been given the rights to use the song for free pizzas, and that's what we suspect." The band was managed by 2 guys, Arnold Tenser and Joe Zuckerman, who had no prior business experience. They were actually fast food employees prior to managing the group, but they were smart. They got the band members to sign away their administrative rights to their songs. In turn, the managers had the rights to their songs, and they're able to license them out to different media and pocket a lion's share of the money. The band members were receiving about $5,000 every few months, which to them seemed like a good deal of change. But in reality, they should have been receiving upwards of $50,000 instead. They weren't even aware their song was being licensed for so many movies and TV shows. What happened in the late 80s and early 90s was that the band was embroiled in a legal mess that dragged on for years, that saw the members discover that their management had pocketed the royalties that they were owed from their music. The band was eventually able to sort things out. An arbitrator awarded the group past royalties and interest in excess of $1 million in 1995. But the band never received that. This was due to poor bookkeeping on their manager's part and the fact that their management had squandered a good chunk of money as well. As for what happened to their managers, the Chicago Tribune reported that Zuckerman was working as a bartender at a topless bar, while Tenser was a butcher. Years later, What I Like About You also appeared in the video game Guitar Hero Encore Rocks the 80s. The band ended up filing a federal lawsuit against Activision, the publisher of Guitar Hero, claiming that the video game manufacturer had infringed on the band's rights. In those days of Guitar Hero and music games, a lot of these games only featured covers since they didn't have the huge budgets they'd later go on to have down the road, and some artists didn't want to hand over their masters as the game was not at its peak popularity. The Romantics contended that the cover that was found in that Guitar Hero game sounded too much like the original. The Romantics ended up losing their case in December of 2007 when a judge stated that Activision had taken all necessary steps in developing its product. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in Rock Culture Stories. Take care.